probably created by a group of atheists, people from Europe. And it was somehow, the Zionism was a continuation of the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment, and main part of the deal was to create a new Jew, a Jew that is totally different from the Jew of the shtetl, the Jew that lived in Eastern Europe. And of course, the leadership, the religious leadership of the rabbis, the what we would call today ultra-Orthodox or Haredi rabbis, totally opposed the whole idea of Zionism, and for them it was something very bad because it's to detach the Jews from their heritage, to detach the Jews from Judaism and create somehow secular Judaism. It was also, let's say, if we think of epitomizing of the ideas of Zionism and secularism, you can think of the kibbutzim. Kibbutz, somehow communal village that was created in Israel, and the kibbutzim themselves as an idea were really very much secular in the matter. Until now, there are two kibbutzim that they grow pigs. They grow pigs to make pork because that is part of their identity. I still met, I mean, let's say 20, 30 years ago, I had the chance to meet people that their typical life story, which is very typical to people from that generation, was, I grew up in Poland. I grew up in a very Orthodox family. I became Zionist. And my family was sitting Shiva on me, namely they mourned me as I was dead. So I went to Israel, I joined the kibbutz. Of course, all of my family died in the Holocaust. I stay here, and of course, you can guess they don't really like religion at all. So that's, I mean, the mainstream or the radical thing of the Zionism and the kibbutzim. Even I had a grandfather that once he fought in the War 48, the Israeli War of Independence, and he fought in the defense of one kibbutz. And he said one day there was a heavy Egyptian bombardment on the kibbutz. And it's amazing that all of the houses were hit except for the synagogue. And maybe it had something to do with the fact that they didn't have one. And now we still, let's go further about what is really going on in Israel, because it's a very complex story. So in Israel, still, you have religious people, you have non-religious. So, and it's built on compromises. Israel, I don't know if you know, doesn't have a constitution. And why generally Israel doesn't have a constitution? Because the Jews could not agree between themselves about what should be written there. So many things are built on some kind of compromises. Many of the compromises are built on the status quo ante. In Latin, I mean, the situation that was before, namely, if before the establishment of Israel, there is no public transportation, okay, on Saturday, on Shabbat, the holiday. So in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, you don't have public transportation on Saturday and Jewish holidays. In Haifa, for whatever reason, it was mainly an Arab city, so there was. So until today, there is public transportation in Haifa and other towns. So when we speak about the religious streams in Israel, it's of course a very, very complicated story, but I will try to make a long story short. So you have the ultra-Orthodox or the Haredi, you know, people that dress in black. I don't know to go into stereotypes, but I don't know if I have any chance in the 15 minutes that I was given. People that dress in black, usually some beards and black kippah on their heads. So as I said, from the beginning, they said that Zionism is bad. Zionism is something that was intended to detach the Jews from Zionism. But you know, Israel is existing for more than 70 years. So more and more they emerge into the Israeli society. They have political power. Actually, it's way bigger than their own weight in the society because of some political reasons that we don't have time to speak about. And though they say Zionism is bad, they found a place in the Israeli society, and they don't serve in the military because they prefer to learn Torah. And you can guess that the other Israelis do not really like them for that. The other main group are the national religious or Zionist, national or Zionist religious. Those are people that usually will not wear in black, but will have a kippah, woven kippah on their scalp. And mainly the mainstream theology of these groups see the Zionism as kind of maybe redemption or good thing, at least, as part of a messianic a divine project to bring the Jews back to their promised land. So they support the Zionism, and even they are ultra-Zionist. Namely, they support of the right wing in Israel. They support to build the settlements in the West Bank, and they support that Israel will stay there, will not give it back to the Arabs and not create a Palestinian state. And they served, and then they do serve in the military and find a place in the Israeli society, Israeli economy. They unlike the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox, they go to universities, they study, many of them work in high tech. What you have in the US and you hardly have in Israel is Reform Judaism. Israel was established by Jews that came from Eastern Europe, and later came Jews that arrived from Muslim countries like Yemen, Morocco, Iraq. And both in Eastern Europe and in Islamic countries, you don't have hello? And both in these countries,
this is extra
you
and
don't
I gotta
have,
like
I mean, if
write
somebody
a
is,
paper.
you can silence the, and you don't have Reform Judaism there. And the Reform Judaism actually evolved. I know many more on Europe than about the US, and I'm sure that you learn, you know more about the US from the course than me. I think that Reform Judaism in Europe started mainly in Germany. And part of the ideas of Reform Judaism in Germany was Judaism like that is not good. We have to reform it exactly like the Christians reformed the Catholicism and went into Protestantism or reform Christianity. So they say, oh, it doesn't make sense that the synagogue will be such a messy place. You must bring an organ to play there so it'd be nice, exactly like our neighbors. The Germans go to the church and hear works of Johann Sebastian Bach. We also want to have nice synagogue, men and women should sit together. And the embarrassing part of that this criticism of Judaism is exactly similar to the criticism to anti-Semitic criticism of Judaism. For example, if you read the anti-Semitic pamphlet, Judaism in Music, written by the composer Richard Wagner, he writes, oh, synagogue is terrible. You come next to synagogue, hear shrieking noises. It's such a mess, such cacophony. And you come to church, oh, Christians are good. You hear nice music. So somehow the criticism of the Reform Judaism somehow very similar to anti-Semitic writings. So that's maybe also one reason that Reform Judaism didn't find much place in Israel. Let's say in the US, most of the Jews that go to congregations, go to liberal, reform, conservative congregation. But in Israel, I think there are from synagogues and maybe not even 1 promille from the entire synagogues in Israel. So well, we can say that the synagogue to which the Israeli doesn't go is an Orthodox one. So let's talk more about the Israel. You have majority which is between secular and traditional, but still it's somehow within the adobe of Orthodox Judaism. We have among the compromises, we have the personal status, marriages and divorces are given to the religious community, to the religious clerics or whatever you want to call them, to religious communities. Namely, if one of you come to Israel and naturalize, I want to get married in a marriage when one of the spouse is a Jew and the other one is not, according to the definition of Orthodox Judaism, you just cannot marry in Israel in this situation. What Israelis really do, they fly to the nearby island of Cyprus, they fly maybe to Europe and they get married there, and then Israeli government recognizes the marriages that are done abroad. And many other compromises that work more or less the same, some kind of some funny compromises, and the Israeli learn to live with them, and they really love to fight. Israel is really confrontational. They love to fight here and there between the religious and the secular, but it's not getting so violent, and there's some kind of rules, and it's usually about the coalition to create a government, and the government falls apart. It's some kind of pastime that Israelis really like. Maybe I'll bring something from my research about the Middle East. almost all Middle Eastern countries have what I can call the notorious Article number 1 in the Constitution. What says the notorious Article number 1? They say that Islam is the official religion of the state. Even in Turkey, that went into some deep secularizing reforms at the time of Ataturk, they still have it in the constitution. Read Article number 1 in almost every Arab country in the constitution. You will find that it's the official religion of the state. In Israel, no. Actually, Israel is a Jewish state, but when we say that, and especially people that wrote it and voted for that, it actually means Jews are both religion and nation. So when we say Jewish state, it doesn't mean that the Jewish religion is the religion of the state. It means that it's state for Jews. And that's, again, another thing that Israelis love to debate about, and they will always continue to debate and never come to any kind of conclusion because they love to debate. But if I want to compare it, for example, to Egypt, if somebody is sentenced to death in Egypt, you know how they say it in Egyptian cinema? They say the papers have been delivered to the Mufti. The Mufti is the highest hierarchy of religious decrees. So if you want to make capital punishment, you have to give it to the highest authority of the religion of Islam. Does it matter if the one condemned to death is Christian, Muslim? It doesn't matter. Islam is the religion of the state. If somebody is about to be executed, it goes to the Mufti. Of course, the Mufti is just a rubber stamp. He goes and writes it, فَلْيُقْتَلْ مَنْ قَتَلْ, the one who killed shall be killed, from a citation from Islamic sources, and that's it. But still, Islam is the religion of the state. Everybody lives under Islam. In Israel, there are some compromises, but Judaism is not the religion of the state. Namely, if a Muslim will never face a Jewish rabbinical court. A Jew might face a Jewish rabbinical court even if he doesn't want to. Let's say he marries, his wife wants to divorce, he doesn't want, he must go to the religious rabbinical court. They can even send him to jail if he just refuses to do the divorce. But a Muslim Israeli, Arab Israeli, Christian Israeli, there is no way that he will go to the Jewish rabbinical court. He might be dragged to his Muslim court or Christian court, but Judaism is not above the other religions, the other religions of the citizens of Israel who are not Jews. So mainly, if I want to summarize, we speak about a system that actually, like in the US, even like in France, even though you have separation between state and church, you still have all the time debates between religion and the state. And they also exist in Israel. In Israel, they are made in some of endless compromises that all the time are challenged by different groups, by other groups. Let's say if, do we have, let's say, two more minutes? Okay, so let's okay. So for example, if I want to speak, let's speak about LGBTQ people. So how did it start? It started with the British law. The British law banned sodomy. It was not a religious law. And the British very generously, when they left all the colonies, including mandatory Palestine, they left the laws to all of the colonies. So when Israel was established, we still had the law that sodomy is a criminal act. One of the greatest Israeli jurists, the Justice Chaim Cohen, later Justice of the Israeli Supreme Court, ordered the police, no, do not enforce this thing. It's a bad thing. You cannot send people to jail because something they did in their own bedroom. So it was not enforced. And only in '88, it was finally canceled, this disgraceful article from the Israeli law. So it became legal. Gay people cannot get married, of course, until today, because all the marriage go to the rabbis, and the rabbis, of course, will never get two men or two women married. They can do what other people do that don't want or cannot get married in Israel, they can go to Europe and get married there, and Israel will recognize them as married. And with the time, there are also gay parades, and the Haredi people really oppose that. But they learn that there is no way that they can stop it, and they learn to live with that. And something even funny, that the Israeli right wing is working more with the religious people, is more close to the religious stream, and the left is more with the secular. But now we have one of the ministers of the Likud party, of the right wing, the party of Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's openly gay. He's married to his partner, and they even have two children. His name is Amir Ohana. He's even from Morocco, from people from Oriental countries, from Morocco, from Yemen, usually inclined to more traditional form of Judaism. But with the time, Israeli learn how to live with that, and they learn that gay people are okay, and even is sitting in the government with the religious people, with the religious member of the Knesset, with other people that are rabbis, and he doesn't have a special problem with that. Okay, maybe I think it's a time to start a debate with questions. And
sure, thank you very much. So I want to open the floor first to students. You've given us a lot to think about, both in terms of the way that the state is structured and the place of Jewishness within the Jewish state, but also the individual experiences, right? So there's a structural level, and then how I, as a person, I spent a year living in Israel. How did I, as a Jewish person, move around this state, right? So, students, and just unmute yourself. And if you're going to speak, I ask that if you can and you're comfortable, that you show your face as well.
I just had a quick question. I was wondering if you could expand on your experience with the Harry S. Truman Institute. Like, what are some things that you did there? What are some policies and solutions that you like the idea of or that you support?
Sure, that's an institute of research. And what I did there was mainly was writing my PhD about Arab cinema, and especially on the history as reflected in the Arab cinema. And because the Arab cinema, especially the Egyptian one, is the cinema that is reflected to the entire Arab world. And then it has a lot of it's a central place in shaping the Weltanschauung, the way that people seeing their common identity. For example, I wrote about the image of the Jew in the Arab cinema, how at some points it was anti-Semitic, then at some points the Egyptian filmmakers stopped showing Jews in the way that is more or less taken from the anti-Semitic imagery of Europe, and then they brought it into more, like, how will I say it? Let's say the Israelis was a strong enemy. We fought against the Israelis. We defeated them in the war of 73, and we see them as a strong enemy. We want to have peace with them, but they must stop killing the Palestinians. They must stop oppressing the Palestinians. So less anti-Semitism, more into the conflict, the way they see the conflict. Beside of that, Harry Truman Institute was having a lot of discussions with people from all over the world about different peace processes. For example, about 2 weeks ago, passed from coronavirus, Saib Arikat, who was the leading negotiator of the Palestinians. And then once, for example, he came to Truman Institute, explained how much it's important to make a peace deal. He came with Israeli negotiators, and they explained that it's very crucial to come to a peace solution and establish Palestinian state. They claim that if Israel will not come to a peace treaty, Israel will come to apartheid, or they even call it Spartide, because Israel will be like Sparta, that all the time fighting, and will keep Palestinians as second-degree citizens or people. At least that was their view. If you want to see how it comes, what happens in reality about my personal experience, so there was a nice young researcher that came there and arranged this workshop and the meeting. And in the middle of the meeting, Mr. Ari Kat, he came from distance, he said, okay, can I have a cup of coffee? So we, the young researcher, were in this kitchen, and the young female researcher said, I don't feel right. I came to academy, I came to study, and what do? Do I have to make coffee for men? So I say, you know what? You're right, but you don't mind if I make him the coffee because I'm a man. I don't care. I don't care. So I had the merit of making him a coffee. It's like so I have the most idiotic, the cyst and I story in this story.
What relationship do people living in Jewish people living in Israel, what relationship do they have with the United States, or how do they think and conceptualize the United States? Because this past week in class, we've focused on how American Jews conceptualize, Israel and their relationship to it. And I want to get like the opposite perspective, I guess.
It's a great question. And well, of course, I cannot speak in the name of all of them. I can say that if we want to speak about Donald Trump, let's be frank, let's talk about what really happened. So I think that mostly the Israelis liked the achievements of Trump, especially that he brought peace agreements between Israel and some Gulf states and Sudan lately. And the main division between right wing and left wing, and that became in last years too, pro-Netanyahu and anti-Netanyahu, pro-Bibi and anti-Bibi. And what really happened is that because of the close relationship between Netanyahu and Trump, so those who are pro-Bibi were almost 100% of them pro-Trump. Those Israelis that thought that Bibi is a disaster, Netanyahu is a disaster because he doesn't bring the peace, because he's so close to the Orthodox, to the religious part of the society, and religious, that they all the time also compare that with the right wing or the extreme Israeli right wing. So the same people will also say that Trump is a disaster. People that blame Trump from xenophobic policy will also blame Netanyahu for similar xenophobic, ethnocentric, Judeo-centric policies. So once Trump lost the elections, they were actually very happy. And you can guess that people that supported Netanyahu more or less were very sad about the loss of Donald Trump. Both of them put themselves. I plan today to write a proposal to an article about summarizing Trump and especially to bring it to the Israelis, because the media, both in Israel and the US, doing very problematic work in describing the reality, saying, okay, what was going on? Not just being totally 100% bad, 100% black or white, bad or good. So where was I? I was speaking about the way that they saw Trump. So think that they placed themselves, both Netanyahu and Trump, as the protectors of the mainstream, the local, the conservative, the lower strata against what they call the extreme left, the radical ones, the socialists, against people that want to impose very radical policies on a population that doesn't represent them. So you are in Ohio. I was in Ohio for I lived there for 2 years. And what I saw in the election campaign of 2016 was very similar to things that I know from Israel. And I was even in a Trump rally. I was in a meeting of people that of the Republican Party, people that supported Trump. There was John Voight, the actor, and he spoke again about the rule that the Obama administration promoted, even enforced, in order to get federal funding, that in high schools, every student will be able to go to the toilets based on the way he defines himself. And at least that's when John Voight and his guy said that it really pissed off many people in a big high school in Ohio, because if you have hundreds of girls and about four people that were born men, and they find themselves as women, and they insist of getting into the girls' restroom, and instead of using one man restroom, individual restroom. So it's for them it was like enforcing policies of progressives, of extreme left, on radicals, on many people that just don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to persecute gay people. Nobody says, at least in this meeting, and generally as much as I saw Trump, they should cancel same-sex marriage. They don't want to oppress them, but they don't want them to come to us. They don't want them to come and to enforce on us these things that we don't want. So you can see in Israel many different things, namely the idea that there are gay couples that having children, even gay people in the Knesset, both for the right wing and the left wing. Actually, Israelis accepted it more or less okay. When it comes to more radical things and radical policies tried to be enforced on other people, then it was, oh, wait a moment, maybe we need Netanyahu, maybe we need Trump to protect us from this radical way of enforcing things on us. I mean, did I answer your question? Maybe you have more to ask about. What exactly in the US?
That was a very detailed summary, so thank you. I'll yield to my other classmates if they have anything to ask before I ask any follow-ups. I don't want to monopolize time.
I think you can feel free to give a follow-up.
Okay, so you touched on the idea that right now there's a current in both American and Israeli politics that is, sort of somewhat okay with progressivism, but wants to rein it in and, maintain the conservatism of like communities and maintain some traditional values. As mentioned at the beginning, the formation of the state of Israel and Zionism itself did not come out of that same environment. It was a more secular, more socialist-oriented project. How do you think it developed to this point where it is starting to mirror American divides as opposed to where it began?
It's a wonderful question. And let's start with the beginning. So remember, most of Israelis came from Europe, and it all reflects European divides. And also Israel was built on European ideas. So think that it started with main and central aspect of socialism. I mean, the main people that wanted to create kibbutzim. The kibbutz, the idea is everybody is equal. Even the CEO of the factory of the kibbutz and the guy that works with the cows in the kibbutz, they should have the same salary or the same allowance from the kibbutz. They all eat together in the dining hall, and all the children grow up together. That's somehow reflection of socialist and even communist ideas that are in Europe, that came from Europe. And maybe it's a good idea to remind here. Think of the first communist. I mean, they're all Jews. Think of the leaders of the Bolsheviks in Russia. You had Trotsky, you had Zinoviev, they were all Jews. After World War I, there was communist revolt and communist rule in Hungary for a few months, led by a man whose name was Kuhn. Kuhn, a few ancestors back, Cohen. In Germany, for a few months, was led by communists in different places from Germany. One of them, Rosa Luxemburg, a Jew, and she was not even from Germany. She came from Poland, and Jewish communist woman from Poland, from all the places. She decides she comes to Berlin. Okay, I established communism in Berlin. Why? Because I believe in communism. And that's something that Holocaust researchers do not speak about, that about the reflect of that. Think of Germans, that you have a Jewish communist woman from Poland and coming establishing communism in Germany. They think that the Jews are like cosmopolites. They have no homeland and they want to establish communism in different places. They don't recognize any idea of nationalism. So that's the story for the Jews who rejected nationalism. So Zionism say, oh, you want socialism, that's good, but let's have a Jewish socialism. So come to Israel, live in a kibbutz. And then you bring the socialism with you as part of building a new Jew. And that, of course, was created also to secession with religion or using religion as some kind of a culture. And also mitigating the socialism. Namely, you want to create a Jewish state, and you also want to create a socialism. That was like the mainstream of the builders of the state of Israel, the founding fathers like Ben Gurion. But still, if you have to measure them, what is more important, still, there were more Jews, they were more Jewish, namely they want more Jewish state. And they wanted to protect the rights of the Arab workers in Israel, but once there was a war, and so they wanted to, the Arabs, once the Arabs tried to mainly kill the Jews and frustrate the establishment of state of Israel, so these people didn't say, oh, let's keep the Arabs and make them socialists. No, it's better that the Arabs will not be here and let's build the Jewish state, and the Arabs that will stay will have our socialism. But if we have a huge Arab minority, we cannot make a Jewish state like that. So they prefer the Arabs to run away, and in some cases even force them to leave Israel. So it was somehow the Israeli left. Israel was created by the left until from 48 to 77, Israel was controlled by the left-wing parties, Labour Party. Only later, the right wing managed to come to power. So it was a main stronghold of socialist ideas, socialism from Europe, built by people that came from Eastern Europe. The way what they knew, they made in Israel. It's not like in the US. For example, just an example, daily life. In the US, you can open Walmart. They can be open 24/7, every supermarket. In Israel, stores are closed in Shabbat, of course, on Saturday, and they cannot be open at night. In Europe, if I lived in some places in Europe, in Switzerland, in France, in Austria, supermarkets are closed on Sunday. It's not about religion. It's not about coercing religious Christian rights or something. It's about the workers of the supermarkets needs to rest. So if you want to buy a bread on Sunday morning, you can go to a bakery, you can go to a kiosk, but you cannot go to the main supermarket next to me. Also, the close, let's say, sometimes they let them open 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. You want to open at 8 a.m., so you close 10 hours later. It's the law of the state in the country. It's a socialist law. So that's something that is very common in Europe, and it's not common in the US. You'll be very surprised if you come and you see that all supermarkets, all Walmarts are closed on Sunday. So they brought the socialist ideas from in the European style, and they enforced them in the way that was. Of course, the religious people are very happy to say, oh, let's do a status quo. Everybody agrees that supermarkets should be closed on Shabbat. The religious Jews for their religious reasons, but also the founding fathers of the state for their socialist worldview that says that workers should not work 7 days a week. A woman that works in Walmart should have a day to rest with her family, not she will work on the resting day and their children will miss their mother on the same day. So it worked that way. Later with the years, especially when the right wing took power, actually people from the right wing study in the US. Netanyahu, you can hear him, he has the accent of somebody that studied in MIT, in the Ivy League. They brought the ideas from the US that you have more free market and less state involvement, less welfare. So in the beginning, there was a lot of welfare. The children get children allowance from the state and it still exists. And many other things. The right wing actually tried to cut that and to go into more free market, less taxation. In that case, against Netanyahu was somehow the leading force, at least in the last 25 years or so, to a more free market based on high tech, based on American style, less taxes, less government involvement. And the left try to say, no, let's go to the more European style social democratic values and continue. That's until today. You have the national security that is it's in Israel. It's more like Europe. They take care of you. They give you a child allowance and unemployment money, and also they give women that give birth. The state sponsor vacation. These are things that continued from the former ideas of socialism. Of course, the health insurance, it's like overall health insurance, like in Europe, because that's what people came from Europe, and they brought it to Israel, unlike what's going on in the US, that it's mainly you have to take care of your own health insurance by your employer, not the state doesn't necessarily gives you the health insurance. So in last years, it's more people look more in the US and then they think more of, oh, I'm more for Trump. I think that Bernie Sanders, the ideas of Bernie Sanders, like European left are more suitable to us. That's what they say on the left. The problem for the inherently problem of the Israeli left that actually they couldn't solve until now. That's why they're in extremely bad situation is that the people from Oriental countries, traditional people, ultra-Orthodox people, and religious people do not trust them, do not support them. And they say, oh, they came from socialist background. They don't really believe in God. They don't really like Judaism. They don't like the religion. So they keep on voting for the right wing. They keep on the coalitions of Netanyahu included the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi. They included also the leaders of the, let's say, ultra-Orthodox Oriental party. They included the party of the national religious people. And mostly if you come to lower strata of the society, whom they vote, almost all of them vote for Netanyahu. They vote for the right wing.
Thank you.
Now, any additional students? I know you prepared some questions in advance. I've yet to look at them and I apologize. They came in late last night and I had to take care of something this morning. Other questions? I'll ask one of my own in that case, and it has to do with marriage, right? So what, as Dr. Birnbaum explained, one can only get married in a church, right? Through a religion. And in Israel, that generally means that you can only marry within your religion. Israel, because it's bound by international treaties, will recognize marriages conducted abroad, even if they're marriages between, say, a Jew and a Muslim. That's fine. They're married. This does seem to me, and this applies, it seems also to gay marriages. Now, this seems to mean that only the wealthy can marry between religions, and only wealthy members of the LGBTQ community can marry in homosexual marriages or in single gender marriages if they have the money to travel. Is there a discussion around the class inequities around this in Israel?
I think that it's not extremely expensive to fly to the nearby island of Cyprus and get married there. It's not so expensive. And by the way, it means also that the state will not make you the marriage. Namely, I know many people, including gay people, that, they have marriage. They invite all the friends to the marriage and they have a very nice party and everybody's dancing and happy. And it's not something recognized by the state, but doesn't mean you cannot have a nice party. And later they can have they can be registered as marriage or not. Some people even don't bother to get married. I don't think that the money thing is the crucial thing for this purpose. I think that even if you speak about the party, the money for the arranging it is not the most expensive part to pay for that, and even a flight abroad is not the most expensive thing. I don't think it's all about the money.
No, but
And,
obviously it's a question of rights. I mean, my question, we have a
sure.
country with a 20% poverty rate, right? Like the United States, we're seeing increasing disparities between vast wealth and crushing poverty. And let's not even to speak within the Palestinian population, which suffers poverty at higher rates. So, I always hear back the answer when I've asked this question other places, oh, but flights aren't that expensive. But if I am choosing if I'm barely paying for my rent and my food, a flight can be extremely prohibitive. I think we don't see the lower classes when we talk about this, and what's at stake can be like visitation rights at a hospital, inheritance rights. But
actually, in this aspect, they have like some kind of bypass solution. In Israel, they really love to do bypass solution. If we speak about things like visitation rights, you can write a paper that it's called like known in public as couple. They can write a paper on, I think even if they live together for enough time, they get some kind of legal recognition. So if that's actually, it's not a problem. If they live together for a lot of time, they find a way, they can just sign this contract between them, so they'll be recognized in public as couple. And even I think it happens to even not because of the religion, even just, men and women living together for 20 years. Let's say they're both divorced. They never bothered to get married for whatever, maybe just didn't want to. Exactly like in the US. I know couples in the US that also have children, they never get bothered to get married. They will have, if they separated, still the wife can ask for alimony, she can ask for rights. If they had shared property, she can ask her share in the property. So I think in this aspect, the religion is not very central. Maybe that's something that I didn't say. Maybe it's when you speak about religion. When Israel was established, actually, it wasn't a problem. Everybody that wanted to get married could have got married because they were all Jews. The real problem started when the Soviet Union fell, and among more than a million newcomers, Jews from the Soviet Union, came people that were whose father was Jewish. Namely, your name, you born and live in Moscow. Your name is Rabinovich. Everybody, of course, curses you in the street for being a dirty Jew because your name is Rabinovich. Your mother is not Jewish. Then people come, make Aliyah to Israel, country of the Jew, come to us. And then you serve in the military, you want to get married, and who is your mother? Oh, she was not Jewish. You are not a Jew for us, Mr. Rabinovich. And so then you will have the problem, and that's somehow the problem of this group of Russians whose only father is Jewish, maybe only grandfather is Jewish. The problem of them with the religious establishment of the state of Israel. Here it comes to be a real problem. Many of them do, okay, go to hell, I go to Cyprus, I get married. Some of them go to conversion. And that's if you speak about strange things that happen in Israel, when they serve in the military military does offer these soldiers that are not Jews according to the halakha, to the Orthodox law, they offer them like workshop or course of conversion. So the Israeli military offers you, oh, you are in Israel, you're not a Jew, you want to spend your last months instead of doing your military job, riding a tank, you can spend them in some kind of dorm, and you will study about Judaism, and at the end, if you behave, you will be able to convert to Judaism if you say the exact lies of that the rabbis ask you to say, and they will convert you. Some of them don't really like to say at the end those lies, and they don't complete the process of conversion. My personal thing is that that if somebody cannot lie to these rabbis, I think he doesn't deserve to be a Jew in the first place. So it's fine with me. And no, I wrote like an article of report about a book of an Israeli professor that wrote a book about like a guide for the secular. He's a professor of history from Tel Aviv University. And I hope it will be published soon in Hebrew. And he writes about the problems that he has with religion in Israel. And one of them was this military course of conversion. It doesn't make any sense that a democratic state will finance and arrange a course for conversion of people to other religion. It's totally bimoni. And then I wrote it, it's like, see how life is smiling to this professor. He's living great life, he's a professor of history, and what bothers him is the military course that the military is doing for some soldiers. Who cares? You live your own life. You want to join this course? Good. You don't want, you don't go. Nobody forces you to go into this military course. So that's the worst thing that the religion has done to your own life. It gives the IDF, the Israeli military, gives some people an opportunity to convert to Judaism. So I think it's not the main problem of the mainstream. Actually, there are main problems that he doesn't care. I think maybe he doesn't care that there is no public transportation in Shabbat. Probably he has a car of his own, so he doesn't care. Poor people that cannot pay for a car, if you live in Jerusalem, you want to have a bus from Jerusalem to Haifa, to another city, in Shabbat you don't have because the state doesn't operate. Here, if you speak about inequality, that's the problem. Poor secular people cannot go from one town to another on Shabbat unless they want to get a special taxi for that. And also they cannot import from abroad. It's not allowed to import from abroad non-kosher meat, which will be cheaper. The government doesn't allow you to do that. And the political ultra-Orthodox leaders have enough power to enforce that. And the people that really want that are not strong enough politically in order to allow it to themselves. The people that have the power fight on other things, fight for the LGBT, fight for this thing, for other things, but for import of non-kosher food, which will be cheaper, no, they don't.
Okay, so we've run out of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Birnbaum. That was enlightening and informative for my students. I'm sure it's given them a lot to think about and hopefully have inspired some. I know I have a lot of seniors, but if you're staying to enroll in your Hebrew language classes that are going to happen in the fall, if you spring, if you speak some Hebrew, but then in the fall, just from the absolute beginning, I want to say it's funny, it's ironic that you cannot import kosher meat, but you can raise pigs for slaughter, right?
They tried to make a law against that, and so the kibbutz said we raise the pigs for the purposes of research. So I guess somebody has written a doctorate in baconology. I don't know. That's how Israelis do it.
That's fantastic.
They Israeli decide. It's ridiculous. You can love kibbutz. They said that we raise the pigs for the purpose of research.
Yeah, I want to see which one tastes better.
Yeah. Oh, that's very scientific.
Exactly. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you to my students. I will see everybody on Monday. Be well. Stay safe.
Shabbat